I woke to the sharp, unfamiliar scent of metal, like an old penny pressed against my skin, and for a long, heavy moment, I couldn't place why I felt so off. The room was quiet except for the soft purr of the heater in the corner and the distant rumble of a Portland bus outside. I sat up, feeling a tension in my shoulders that was all too familiar these days. My little apartment always seemed smaller in the early morning, the corners crowded by books and mismatched mugs collected from thrift stores over the years. I blinked, tried to shake off the feeling that something important had changed overnight. Becca was already awake, humming tunelessly in the kitchen as she poured coffee into our most chipped mug, the one with the faded picture of Mount Hood. "You're up early for a Saturday," she called, not looking up as I shuffled in, clutching the edge of my cardigan tighter around myself. "I had a dream you were rehearsing that wedding speech in your sleep." I tried to laugh, but it sounded more like a sigh. "Maybe I was. Maybe if I practice enough, they'll actually remember I exist." Becca grinned, but I saw the kindness in her eyes, the way she always did when she knew I needed it most. As I cradled the warm mug in my hands, my gaze wandered to the small photo taped to our fridge, me and Madison at ages 7 and 4, grinning on a swing set. Even back then, I'd always looked like I was about to say something, and Madison like she'd already said it, louder and faster. Our mother used to say, "Madison just shines, doesn't she?" The words lingered in the air long after the compliments faded. "Did you get a hold of your mom yet?" Becca asked, spooning sugar into her own mug. I shook my head. "Not yet. I'm just supposed to be there at noon. She wants help setting up for the brunch tomorrow. And for me to stay out of the way." I tried to make it sound like a joke, but the truth pressed at me, a lifetime of being the supporting actress in my family's show. I padded back to my room, sunlight leaking through the curtains and slats. There, hanging by my closet door, was the navy silk dress I'd saved for with 3 months' worth of grocery store shifts. I traced the fabric with my fingers, remembering the first time I tried it on. In the mirror, for a moment, I'd almost believed I could pass for the kind of daughter who belonged in wedding photos. The phone buzzed, a sharp, persistent ringtone I'd learned to both dread and crave. My mother's name lit up the screen, and I hesitated before answering. "Emily? Are you awake? We need to make sure everything's ready for your sister. The florist canceled, so we're doing centerpieces ourselves. Bring your glue gun." I pictured her at home, already halfway through a list, apron crisp, hair in a bun that never fell out of place. "I'll be there," I replied. She didn't ask how I was, or if I was sleeping well, or if I was nervous about the speech. Only, "Don't wear anything too bright. Remember, this is Madison's day." After we hung up, I lingered by the closet. Sometimes I imagined what it might feel like to be the one everyone fussed over, the one whose smile was the centerpiece instead of the background. Family photos lined the hallway at home, each one a testament to the subtle way my parents' gaze always landed a beat longer on Madison. Even our milestones were measured differently: Madison's violin recitals, Madison's honor roll certificates, the Paris trip for her graduation. Mine were quieter, honor roll, too, but without the flowers, my own apartment, but celebrated alone. Becca knocked softly on my door. "You're thinking too hard again. Want help with your hair?" I smiled, grateful for her presence. "Maybe just a braid. I want to look put together." She set to work, her hands gentle. "You're more than put together. You're the reason Madison gets to shine at all, you know." I let the words sit, unsure if I believed them. "Families are complicated," I said quietly. Sometimes I wonder if I'd trade it all just to be noticed, just once, without having to try so hard. Becca just nodded, her eyes soft. "Sometimes, the brightest people are the ones who never get the spotlight." After she left, I pulled the dress off its hanger and slipped it on, feeling the cool fabric settle around my waist. For a moment, I turned and caught my reflection, not invisible, not spectacular, just me. The city outside was waking up, and a gentle rain started, tapping the windows like fingers drumming in anticipation. As I packed my bag, dress, shoes, glue gun, and a notebook with my speech draft, my phone vibrated again. A text from Mom, "Don't stay up too late, big day tomorrow." I stared at the message, feeling both seen and unseen at the same time. In that moment, I resolved I would stand up at that wedding, look out at my family, and say the words I wanted to say, even if my voice trembled. Maybe this time, someone would hear me. Sometimes, I think life is just a series of moments when we hope, quietly, stubbornly, to be chosen. I slipped the phone into my bag and zipped it shut, telling myself that tomorrow could be different. The morning of the rehearsal dinner arrived with a hush, as if the city itself was tiptoeing around some secret. I stretched beneath the quilt and listened to the gentle hum of rain against the window, the usual sounds of early fall in Portland. It should have felt like any other morning, but something in the air was different, quieter, heavier. When I reached up to push the hair from my eyes, my hand brushed my neck. I froze. The familiar weight of my long hair was gone, replaced by sharp, bristly ends and a raw, exposed feeling along the back of my neck. My breath caught. For a moment, I wondered if I was dreaming. I swept my fingers through what was left, uneven, jagged clumps. My chest tightened, panic rising as I twisted to see the mirror by my bed. There, the truth stared back at me, my chestnut hair, once reaching to my waist, now butchered into awkward tufts and rough edges. A pair of scissors rested neatly on my dresser. Next to it, a yellow sticky note, "You'll still look fine. Focus on your speech for Madison's big day." Mom. I sank to the floor, gripping the edge of my comforter, willing myself not to cry. Memories from childhood flickered, Madison getting her hair done for dance recitals, my mother fussing over every strand, while I sat quietly, braiding my own. The sting of those years returned all at once. I should have known it would come to this. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Becca, sending a meme of a dancing cat, probably to make me laugh before the chaos of the day. I tried to type a reply, but my fingers shook. Instead, I hit call. When Becca picked up, my voice was barely more than a whisper. "They cut my hair," I said, unable to say who, but she knew. 10 minutes later, Becca burst through the door, still in her pajamas, hair wild from sleep. She took one look at me, and her mouth fell open. What? Who did this?" I handed her the note. She read it, lips tightening, and sat beside me on the bed. "I can't believe they'd do this. I mean, I knew your mom could be controlling, but this?" Her hand hovered above my shoulder, unsure whether to hug me or just let me grieve. I managed a shaky smile. "Guess I won't be upstaging Madison after all." Becca shook her head, anger flashing in her eyes. "This isn't about hair, Em. This is about them making sure you don't get noticed. Again." She squeezed my hand. "You still have to go to the rehearsal dinner, right?" I nodded, wiping my eyes. "If I don't, it'll just prove their point." I tried to sound brave, but inside, I felt small. She stood, rolling up her sleeves. "Let me fix what I can. If you're going to show up, you'll do it on your terms." Becca gently evened out the choppy pieces, trimming what was left into a short, uneven bob. Each snip felt like another piece of the old Emily falling away. Once finished, she draped a scarf around my shoulders. "You look fierce," she said, her voice softening. "Nobody can dull your light unless you let them." Sometimes, it's not the big gestures, but the quiet faith of a friend that steadies you. I dressed slowly, hands trembling as I zipped up the navy silk dress. For a second, I closed my eyes, recalling the countless family photos on the hallway walls, Madison at the center, all shining eyes and ruffled skirts, me just out of focus at the edge of the frame. The drive to my parents' house was quiet. The trees lining our street had started to turn, leaves drifting in orange and gold, painting the world in soft colors that almost masked the tension in my chest. When I walked in, my father barely glanced up from his cereal at the kitchen table. "Oh, good. You're up," he said, as if nothing had changed. My mother didn't meet my eyes, sipping her coffee with deliberate calm. "Less hair makes your face look less distracting anyway. The attention's not supposed to be on you." I swallowed hard, tasting metal. Madison floated down the stairs, radiant in her white robe, her hair curled to perfection. She paused, taking in my new look, a flicker of something, pity, maybe, passing through her gaze. "Don't ruin this for me, Em," she whispered as she breezed past, leaving the scent of hairspray and expensive lotion behind. The rest of the morning was a blur of small tasks, arranging flowers, folding napkins, listening to my mother's crisp instructions as if I were a member of the staff. Not once did she mention my hair, as though ignoring it would erase the evidence of what she'd done. By noon, I stood at the edge of the dining room, staring at the place cards set perfectly on the table. My name, written in my mother's tidy script, was wedged at the far end, out of the camera's view. The family photos lined the mantelpiece, Madison grinning front and center in every frame. That evening, after the rehearsal dinner, I returned home, exhaustion settling in my bones. Becca was waiting with tea and a kind smile. She didn't ask how it went, she knew. Sometimes the best comfort is simply having someone share the silence. Before bed, my phone buzzed again. Madison's name flashed across the screen. "Don't ruin this for me, Em." I stared at the message, the words cutting deeper than any pair of scissors. As I lay in bed, I wondered how many times I would let them push me to the edge of the frame before I finally stepped into the light. Becca held up a hand mirror behind my head so I could see the jagged lines where my hair once fell. "They did this to you?" Her voice was low, the kind that vibrates with anger and sadness all at once. For a second, I just stared. My reflection looked like someone else, someone who'd just weathered a storm and hadn't yet stepped out of the rain. The sharp bob Becca had tried to even out actually suited me more than I expected, but I couldn't help mourning the soft lines that used to frame my face. "Yeah," I said, my voice catching. "They did." Becca set down the mirror and leaned against the sink, arms folded. "You know, you don't have to keep letting them walk over you, Em. You're allowed to be angry." I shrugged. Anger had never been safe in my family. It was like an ugly stain we scrubbed away for company. The apartment was full of morning light, bouncing off our thrifted kitchen table and the mismatched chairs we'd collected over the years. The city outside was busy, sirens in the distance, traffic humming. But here, in this little apartment, I felt exposed in a new way. I busied myself clearing the counter, trying to keep my hands moving. "I don't even know what I'd do if I really let myself feel it," I admitted. "It's like, if I do, maybe I'll just fall apart." Becca didn't push, just watched me with that steady look she saved for moments when she thought I was lying to myself. "You know, I think the bravest thing you could do is not hide. Just, be seen for once." Later that morning, we ducked into the coffee shop down the street, an old place with creaky wooden floors, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and espresso. There was comfort in its ordinary bustle, college students hunched over laptops, old men arguing about baseball scores, the barista calling out drinks in a bored drawl. Becca ordered her usual, a flat white with an extra shot, and I got tea, hoping it would settle my nerves. We sat in a window booth. I watched rain slide down the glass, blurring the outside world, and finally let the words spill out. I've spent my whole life trying not to get in anyone's way. Always the one on the edge of the photo, always the helpful daughter. Sometimes I feel like if I stopped trying, I'd disappear completely. Becca took my hand across the table. That's not true. You're here. I see you, Em. If your family can't, that's their loss. I let out a small laugh, but it was watery, thin. Do you remember last year, at Thanksgiving? Madison showed up late, and Mom was so relieved she made it, but she never even noticed I'd been in the kitchen all morning. I remember, Becca said quietly. But you're not invisible to me. Or to anyone who really matters. For a moment, the kindness in her voice filled in a space that had ached empty for so long. At the next table, a woman in a smart navy blazer and cat-eye glasses glanced over at us, offering a sympathetic smile before returning to her laptop. She radiated a quiet confidence that made me wonder what it would be like to walk through life that way, unapologetically present. Becca set her cup down. You know, it might help to talk it out. Or even record your feelings. I read this thing online, people record voice memos, just for themselves. Not for revenge, not for anyone else. Sometimes it helps just to say it out loud. I hesitated. You think so? I do. You've been swallowing your voice for too long. She handed me her phone, screen already set to record. Just talk. You don't have to share it if you don't want to. I pressed record and sat in silence for a moment. Then words began to tumble out, little memories, old hurts, stories of being told to blend in, not to make a fuss. Sometimes I think I could vanish, and nobody would even blink, I said, the confession raw and honest in a way I hadn't let myself be in years. When I finished, I looked up. Becca's eyes were shining. That's powerful, Em. You should keep it. Maybe one day, you'll want to share it. Or maybe you'll just listen back and realize how far you've come. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, what was left of it, and smiled. Maybe. I don't want to be angry forever, Becca. I just want to feel like I matter. She squeezed my hand. You do matter. And you're stronger than you think. You're allowed to take up space in this world. Some people will never give you permission, so sometimes you have to give it to yourself. We finished our drinks, talking about little things, the weather, the latest weird Portland news, the way the city seemed both endless and small at the same time. As we left, the woman in the navy blazer caught my eye again. She gave me a nod, a silent acknowledgement. I wondered if she'd overheard us, or just recognized that look in my eyes. Back at the apartment, Becca helped me save the voice memo, labeling it "For Emily, when you're ready." I felt lighter, like maybe the heaviness wasn't just mine to carry anymore. That afternoon, my phone chimed. A group chat message popped up from Mom, looking forward to your speech, Emily. Mom. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keys. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't sure what I was going to say at Madison's wedding, but for the first time, I knew I couldn't just let things go on as they always had. Maybe my family had tried to make me invisible, but I wasn't going to disappear, not this time. Walking into the rehearsal dinner, I felt every pair of eyes on my new haircut. The gentle chatter of relatives and the clinking of wine glasses seemed to hush for a second as Becca and I stepped through the doors. Soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers, mingling with the scent of grapes and candle wax in the air. If anyone asked, I told myself I was just another guest at a perfect vineyard party. But as I scanned the sea of familiar faces, cousins, aunts, distant uncles, family friends, I knew everyone was waiting for a reason to talk. The vineyard itself looked like something out of a bridal magazine. White chairs lined the sloping lawn, fairy lights tangled in the branches of apple trees. Madison had always dreamed big, and tonight, she was the leading lady in her own fairy tale. She stood at the center of a gathering by the arbor, her hair in glossy waves, her laugh ringing bright and effortless. Cameras followed her movements, every smile and twirl recorded for future reminiscing. Emily, a cousin called, eyes darting to my hair, then back to her plate. Love the new look. So bold. I caught a flicker of confusion in her gaze, the kind that meant she wanted to ask what happened but knew better than to be impolite. Before I could answer, my mother was at my side, cool as ever. Emily wanted a change, she said quickly, her voice pitched low for only me to hear. Don't let it be a distraction tonight, all right? She squeezed my arm, gently, but with intent. Remember to keep your speech simple. Madison's the star, darling. I bit back the urge to say something sharp. Instead, I nodded and tried to find Becca, who was chatting with Greg by the buffet. Greg, tall and slightly awkward in his new suit, seemed relieved to see me. Hey, Emily. You look great, he offered, glancing over his shoulder at Madison. His eyes darted between us as if searching for the safest place to land. Becca grinned, nudging my elbow. Heard you're up for the big speech tomorrow. I'm sure you'll say exactly what's in your heart. She said it softly, almost like a secret, her tone lifting the weight in my chest just a little. The evening spun by in a blur of introductions and carefully measured pleasantries. Madison moved from group to group with practiced grace, accepting compliments and gifts. I watched her rehearse her vows with Greg, her voice clear and unwavering, a script she'd written for herself since we were children. She'd always known how to hold a room, to gather all the light in the space and make it hers. At the far end of the terrace, I found myself by the family photo display. Frames in silver and gold, photos from every year, Madison's graduation, Madison's ballet recital, Madison's 18th birthday trip to New York. My own milestones were there too, tucked in the back, sometimes out of focus or cropped. I let my finger drift over the glass, remembering the way I used to search for myself in the background. Linda appeared beside me, straightening one of the photos. You know, Madison's always been a natural, she said, as if reading my mind. That's why everyone adores her. She smiled tightly. Let's try to keep things smooth tomorrow, okay? No surprises. I turned, searching her eyes for some sign of softness, but all I saw was resolve. I know how important this is, Mom, I replied. I'll do my part. Dinner was served under a wide white tent. The meal was elegant, roast chicken, wild rice, local greens. Relatives chatted about travel, work, the latest Oregon wine. My place card sat at the edge of the table, next to Becca's. We exchanged glances as the speeches began, first my uncle, then Madison's childhood friend, both offering glowing stories about Madison's kindness, her talents, her charm. I felt my pulse quicken. Becca leaned over, voice low. If you ever wanted to say what's real, tomorrow's your shot. You deserve to be heard, Em. I nodded, thinking of the voice memo saved on my phone, the stories and hurts I'd never said out loud. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Later, as the evening wound down, I slipped my phone from my bag and quietly started recording. Snippets of laughter, snippets of my mother's voice directing the servers, Madison's friends whispering about her designer shoes. I caught little pieces of truth hidden under the surface. No one seemed to notice. On my way back from the restroom, I paused by the open doorway, listening as Madison practiced her vows for Becca and a few bridesmaids. She glowed under the string lights, reciting promises with a confidence that made me ache. How many times had I watched from the wings as she took the spotlight? I lingered just out of sight as my mother joined Madison, smoothing a stray curl from her daughter's forehead. Her voice, barely a whisper, drifted over to me, "You'll always be the star." The words landed softly but carried the weight of years. I pressed record, capturing the moment, and let the ache settle deep in my chest. In that instant, I knew, this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about a lifetime of being expected to fade quietly, to celebrate from the edges while someone else danced in the center. Greg appeared at my side, offering a tentative smile. "You doing okay?" His voice was gentler than I expected, the first real warmth I'd felt from him all evening. I mustered a smile. "I'm hanging in there." He nodded, glancing back at Madison, then at me, a furrow of worry settling on his brow. I wondered if he saw what I saw, a family trained to perform, to hide the messy parts. As the night wore on and the party began to wind down, I found Becca near the terrace, watching the stars. We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the laughter and the quiet ache beneath it. "You know," she said, her voice low, "sometimes you have to stop waiting for someone to notice you. Sometimes you have to notice yourself." I took a deep breath, the night air cool against my skin. Maybe it was time to stop watching from the sidelines. Maybe tomorrow, I'd finally find the courage to step into the light. My hand shook as I played back the recording on my phone later that night. The apartment was quiet, the hush broken only by the distant sound of a train winding through Portland's dark streets. Light from my laptop spilled over the scattered papers and the half-empty mug of chamomile tea that had long since gone cold. I pressed play again, listening to the echo of my mother's whisper, "You'll always be the star," and let the ache settle into my bones. I'd spent years collecting their words. Sometimes I jotted them in a journal, sometimes they rattled around in my head like loose change. I never imagined I'd need them for anything. But now, with the wedding looming and my nerves raw, I found myself replaying every memory, every sharp comment, every moment I'd been pushed to the edge of the frame. Becca sat on the sofa, legs tucked beneath her, scrolling her phone as if the right meme might save the night. She looked up when I sighed, offering a gentle smile. "Still thinking about tomorrow?" "Thinking, worrying, regretting, second-guessing. You name it," I said, running a hand through what was left of my hair. "Do you think I'm crazy for wanting to actually say something this time?" Becca shook her head, her voice soft but steady. "No. I think you'd be crazy not to. You've spent your whole life making yourself smaller. Maybe tomorrow's the day you show them how big your heart actually is." I watched the city lights flicker outside our window, the rain blurring everything into smears of gold and gray. Sometimes, I thought, the world doesn't get softer as we get older. It just teaches us new ways to survive. I opened a blank document on my laptop. The original speech, polished, pretty, full of the right words and empty compliments, sat in a folder, untouched. I started a new file, staring at the blinking cursor. For a long time, nothing came. Becca came over, setting her phone aside. "Want help?" I don't even know where to start. Every time I think about what I want to say, I just freeze. "Then start with that," she said. "Start with the truth. You don't owe them a perfect sister, Em. You just owe yourself some honesty." I typed a single sentence. "I have always felt like a guest at my own family's table." The words looked strange on the screen, but as I kept writing, more followed. Memories tumbled out, the times I'd been overlooked, the moments I'd tried to be brave, the little ways I'd learned to comfort myself. I wrote about Madison, about being proud and resentful at once. I wrote about wanting to belong. When my hands started to tremble, I paused and looked at Becca. She nodded, encouraging. This isn't revenge, Em. This is reclaiming your story. There's a difference. I scrolled through advice threads on Reddit, watched videos from women on TikTok who'd stood up for themselves at family events. One said, "You can't force someone to see your worth. You can only stop hiding it." I let those words sink in. If other people could be brave, maybe I could, too. The night stretched on, minutes slipping into hours. Becca made popcorn, and we shared it in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Sometimes she would read a line from my draft and smile, or gently point out a place where I was holding back. Say what you need to say. Not what they want to hear. By 2 a.m, I had 2 speeches, one that followed the script my mother would expect, and one that told the truth. I printed both, tucking them carefully into my bag. The choice felt heavy, but I knew it was mine to make. Before we went to bed, Becca pressed her hand over mine. I'll be right there tomorrow. Whatever you decide, you won't be alone. I thanked her, grateful beyond words. Sometimes I wish I'd grown up in a family that made it easier to be brave. Becca smiled softly. Sometimes, it's the hardest families that make the bravest daughters. And besides, you found your own people along the way. Just as I was turning out the light, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. I listened, holding my breath. My mother's voice, calm and clipped, echoed through the speaker. "Emily, I just want to remind you, family comes first. Please, do what's right for Madison tomorrow. Don't make a scene." I sat on the edge of my bed, the message lingering in the quiet. I thought of all the times I'd put family first, how often that had meant putting myself last. In the dark, I traced the outlines of my speeches, the new version heavy with hope and fear. Dawn crept over the city, pale and hesitant. Outside, I could just make out the skyline and, beyond it, the soft hills that held the vineyard where it would all play out. I imagined the venue being set up, tables dressed in white, bouquets arranged just so, the promise of 1,000 photos waiting to be taken. There was something sacred about mornings like this, when everything was still possible, and the world seemed, for a moment, gentle again. I lay back, eyes wide open, listening for the first birdsong. Today, I thought, could be the day I finally stepped out of the shadows. Maybe, just maybe, a new beginning waited for me on the other side. The wedding morning was unnaturally quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Light spilled through the curtains in soft gold bars, settling on my suitcase packed and waiting by the door. I dressed in silence, my hands trembling just enough to make it hard to fasten the little silver clasp at my wrist. Somewhere outside, the city was waking up, but in my apartment, it was all stillness and nerves. Becca appeared in the hallway, holding 2 travel mugs. "You ready?" she asked, her smile gentle. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We walked out into the cool morning, a hush settling between us. The drive to the vineyard wound through quiet neighborhoods, trees arching overhead, the sky a bright, promise-filled blue. When we arrived, the grounds were already alive with last-minute chaos. Delivery vans idled along the gravel drive, florists carted buckets of blooms across the lawn, and staff in crisp black shirts rushed from the kitchen to the tent. The air buzzed with excitement and nerves. I felt both out of place and, oddly, at home. Maybe it was the sense that something was about to change, and for once, I'd have a say in how. Inside the bridal suite, Madison stood in front of a full-length mirror, a small army of hands pinning her dress, smoothing her hair, dusting powder across her cheekbones. She looked radiant, like the kind of bride you see in magazines. Linda hovered nearby, her voice clipped as she directed the stylists. No, not that pin, use the one with the pearls. And careful with the train, there's no time for mistakes today. I stepped inside quietly, but neither Madison nor my mother glanced up. For a moment, I was invisible again. I took a deep breath and set my bag in the corner, watching the swirl of activity. There's a particular ache that comes from loving people who only sometimes see you. Becca appeared at my side and slipped her hand into mine for a brief squeeze. "You're not alone," she whispered. Then, quietly, she pressed her phone into my palm. On the screen was the audio file, the snippets I'd recorded at the rehearsal dinner. I slid it into my clutch, feeling its weight like a secret talisman. I made my way outside, drawn to the open air and the rows of grapevines stretching across the hillside. Early summer sun warmed the earth, the breeze carrying the sweet scent of clover and roses from the bouquets lining the ceremony arch. For a moment, I let myself wander between the rows, breathing deeply, grounding myself. It's funny, the things you remember in moments like these: Madison's first piano recital, when I sat in the audience holding flowers for her, not a soul looking for me. The time I made the honor roll and my mother glanced up from her phone just long enough to say, "Good job, sweetie," before returning to her conversation. The way my father always looked past me at family dinners, as if searching for the daughter he really wanted. Madison found me among the vines, her dress gathered in one hand, her eyes wary. "Emily, please," she said, her voice low. "Don't ruin this for me. Just do the speech, smile, and let me have my day. You know how important this is." I looked at her, taking in the fear and desperation behind her perfect exterior. "I know how important it is, Maddie," I said. "But it's important to me, too." She shook her head and hurried away, the train of her dress trailing behind her like a cloud. Back inside, guests began to arrive, voices bright and loud as they gathered near the tent. My father stood by the entrance, shaking hands, his smile wide but not quite reaching his eyes. Linda circulated, offering greetings, making sure every detail was just so. I found my place by the edge of the terrace, watching the tables fill, the servers pour sparkling cider and Pinot Gris. I caught glimpses of old family friends, teachers from school, Madison's sorority sisters. The world felt huge and small at once, a stage set for a story I wasn't sure I wanted to be in. Becca sidled up beside me. "Whatever happens, you're ready," she said softly. I nodded, heart pounding, the speech is about to begin. My name appeared on the printed program, right after Greg's best friend and before the father-daughter dance. A hush fell over the crowd as the microphone was placed at the front of the tent. The MC's voice rang out, cheerful and confident, "And now, we'd like to welcome the bride's sister, Emily Carter, for a few words." The world seemed to slow. I rose from my seat, feeling every gaze follow me to the front. The breeze lifted my hair, shorter now, but somehow lighter. I could hear my own breath, the thrum of my pulse, the sound of birdsong outside the tent. I glanced at the page in my hand, the old speech, polite and practiced. In my other hand was the phone with the recording, the evidence of everything unsaid. I turned to face my family, my parents' faces tense, Madison's eyes shining with hope and fear. Becca gave me an encouraging nod from the back of the crowd. I set down the script and took the microphone, my voice steady but soft. "I'm not here to read from your script." The words hung in the air, quiet but certain. I saw my mother's expression tighten, my father lean forward, the guests murmuring to each other. A breeze swept through the tent, fluttering the linens and lifting my hair off my shoulders, cool and freeing. In that moment, I felt a shift, something unspoken breaking open, possibility rushing in. For the first time in years, I was standing at the center, choosing my own words. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to be the center of attention. As I stepped forward, the sunlight streaming through the vineyard windows danced on the polished floor, pooling around my feet like a warm, silent encouragement. My hands trembled around the microphone, the paper in my palm already forgotten. All those years of silence, of nodding and smiling and never truly speaking, had led me here, standing in front of my family, their friends, and a roomful of strangers. The expectant hush pressed in from every side, the air heavy with the scent of wine and summer roses. I glanced at Madison, her cheeks flushed beneath her makeup, her fingers knotted in her lap. My parents sat at the front, eyes fixed on me, my mother's mouth a thin line, my father's gaze sharp with warning. Greg hovered uncertainly beside Madison, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. At the edge of the crowd, Becca held up her phone, steady, silent, her eyes willing me forward. I took a breath and set aside the folded script. I know I'm supposed to be up here to say a few kind words and keep it all simple, I began, my voice a little too loud in the quiet. But I can't pretend anymore, not after everything that's happened. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. I felt it, a collective shift, like the wind changing direction. I looked at Madison, then at my mother. It's no secret that I've always been the supporting act in my own family. I've spent a lifetime watching my sister shine, and she deserves to, she really does. But sometimes, being asked to hide so someone else can be seen, it hurts. It's the kind of pain that doesn't go away just because you dress it up or ignore it. My hand shook, but my voice held steady. Growing up, I learned that it was better to be quiet, not to ask for too much, not to make anyone uncomfortable. I wore hand-me-downs and smiled for pictures from the edge of the frame. I heard the jokes about how Madison was the beautiful one, the talented one, the child who could do no wrong. I tried to be happy for her, and most days I was. But every now and then, I wondered what it would be like to be seen, not just noticed, but truly seen. The room was silent, save for the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant chirp of a bird in the vines outside. My mother sat up straighter, lips pressed together, her eyes darting around the room. My father shifted in his seat, his brow furrowing. I pressed on, heart pounding. Last night, someone decided to make sure I wouldn't stand out at this wedding. My hair, something I'd cared for, something that made me feel beautiful, was cut off while I slept. I woke up this morning with pieces of myself missing, and I knew, deep down, it was to remind me of my place. There were gasps around the tables, the clatter of a fork dropped to the floor. Madison's face went pale, Greg stared at me, shocked. My mother started to rise, her voice tight. Emily, this isn't the time. But I lifted the phone in my hand. No, Mom. I think it's exactly the time. I pressed play, and her voice filled the room, cold and clear, you'll still look fine. Focus on your speech for Madison's big day. There was no denying the words, the intent. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. That's enough, Emily. But I didn't stop. My voice grew steadier with each word. I've spent so long trying to keep the peace that I forgot I had a right to my own story. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to be allowed to exist, to be part of this family, not just the backdrop to someone else's happiness. Becca's eyes shone with tears, her phone still trained on me. Around the room, guests whispered, a few shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked at me with pity, others with admiration, and a few with a new, uncertain respect. I'm not here to ruin anything, I said, softer now, but I'm done pretending. I hope that, someday, we can be a family where everyone gets to shine, not just the ones who are easiest to love. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The sunlight, the hush, the stunned faces, all of it wrapped around me. My hands still trembled, but my heart felt strangely calm. Then everything erupted. My father's voice rang out, sharp, furious, "Emily, sit down." Guests murmured, some rising to intervene, others glancing nervously at my mother and Madison. Madison covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. I stood my ground, letting the shock and chaos wash over me. Through it all, I kept my gaze steady, refusing to look away. A breeze swept in through the open doors, lifting the hair around my face and carrying the sound of my mother's recorded words into the summer air. For the first time, I felt the weight of years lifting, just a little. I'd always wondered what it felt like to speak my truth, now I knew. In the aftermath, the room seemed to fracture into 100 voices, all clamoring at once. Chairs scraped back, glasses clinked forgotten on tabletops, and every face I looked at seemed pulled tight with shock or embarrassment. It was as if the air itself had changed, charged and brittle, humming with what couldn't be taken back. My mother was the first to break the silence. "Emily, how could you?" she demanded, her voice sharp as the cut glass in her hand. "You need to leave. Now." My father stood beside her, jaw set, refusing to meet my eyes. His hands were fists at his sides. Madison's face was blotched red with tears, her makeup running in careful streaks. "Why did you have to ruin this?" she choked out. "It was supposed to be perfect. You just had to make it about you, didn't you?" For a moment, I was 7 again, standing on the edge of the playground while the other girls formed a circle, shutting me out. I felt exposed and terribly small. But this time, I didn't look away. I simply nodded, letting the words land where they would. There are moments in life, I realized, when you stop apologizing for simply existing. Some guests hovered awkwardly nearby, offering weak smiles or touching my arm as they filed out. Others avoided my gaze, suddenly fascinated by the floral arrangements or the sunset over the grapevines. One of my aunts, my mother's younger sister, murmured, "You were brave," and squeezed my shoulder before drifting away. Becca was beside me in an instant, one hand gentle on my back, the other pressing my clutch into my palm. "We're done here," she said, voice steady. "Come on. Let's get some air." We made our way through the side door, past servers pretending not to notice, out into the parking lot where the sun was already dipping behind the hills. The air smelled of dust and ripening fruit. I breathed it in, the coolness washing over my skin. We sat on the curb in silence. My dress pulled around my knees, and I stared at my hands, marveling at how steady they'd become. Becca pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the screen. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. I shook my head, not ready yet. Instead, I just listened to the faint sounds of laughter and raised voices drifting from the tent. Every so often, a guest would emerge and hurry to their car, avoiding my gaze. After a while, Becca spoke. "You did the right thing, Em. I know it hurts, but you did." I swallowed, letting the truth settle. The pain was sharp, but beneath it, something else was rising, a lightness, a strange sense of relief I hadn't expected. "I'm not sorry," I said, more to myself than to Becca. "I thought I would be, but I'm not." Becca nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "Sometimes, honesty is the only way out, even if it's messy. I'll tell you a secret, though, messy doesn't mean wrong." A breeze lifted a strand of my hair, tickling my cheek. I looked up at the sky, wide and cloudless, the first stars just beginning to appear. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe all the way down to my toes. Becca scrolled through her phone, then turned to me. "Do you want me to post the video?" "You don't have to, but it could help other people see they're not alone." She waited, not pushing. I hesitated only a second before nodding. "Do it," I said quietly. "If it helps someone else, let it." She tapped a few keys, and within seconds, the moment I'd tried so hard to hide from became something larger, shared, seen, no longer just mine to bear. The video uploaded quickly. Almost immediately, notifications started to pop up, likes, comments, shares, strangers reaching out from all corners of the internet. As I watched the numbers climb, fear and hope tangled in my chest. My phone buzzed, vibrated, then lit up with messages from friends I hadn't spoken to in years, from people I'd never met, all saying the same thing: "Thank you. I needed this. You're braver than you think." Madison's angry text arrived, the words sharp and hurried: "You got what you wanted. Congratulations. Don't contact me again." I let the phone fall into my lap, unwilling to let the old pain drown out the new freedom. For a long time, Becca and I just sat there, side by side, sharing a quiet that felt cleaner and more honest than any silence I'd known with my family. The world kept spinning, the cars came and went, the sky deepened into indigo, and somewhere a dog barked at a squirrel in the vines. I closed my eyes and tilted my head back, feeling both relieved and terrified at once. There's a saying I remember from childhood: sometimes, breaking open is the only way to heal. Tonight, I understood what that meant. My phone continued to buzz, more messages, more people reaching out, more proof that truth, once spoken, can't be buried again. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, I was ready to find out. Overnight, my life became a story strangers debated over breakfast. I woke to the ping and buzz of notifications, my phone vibrating on the nightstand like a persistent bird. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I scrolled through the messages and realized the truth had escaped the vineyard and was racing through the world faster than I could ever have imagined. My face, blurry and blinking in Becca's video, was splashed across screens: TikTok, Instagram, even morning TV. Headlines blinked in and out: sister calls out favoritism at family wedding, viral video sparks online debate about family dynamics. There were thousands of comments. Some called me brave. Others called me selfish, dramatic, even ungrateful. I read them all, heart rising and falling like a tide. In the first hours, Becca hovered by my side, bringing coffee and gentle reminders to breathe. "You don't have to read it all," she told me, taking my phone. "Some people are just looking for something to be angry about. But look," she scrolled through supportive DMs, "you've got more fans than critics." I smiled, but anxiety gnawed at the edges of my resolve. It's strange how the whole world can suddenly know your secret, and yet you still feel alone. There were messages from women who'd lived the same pain, men who apologized for not seeing their own sisters, kids who said I gave them hope. I responded to a few, grateful and careful with my words. It felt important to be kind, to remember that behind every screen was a real person, just like me. Somewhere, an influencer stitched my speech into her morning makeup routine. A news station called and left a voicemail requesting an interview. Reporters sent emails. Even the local newspaper ran a column: family loyalty or family loyalty lost? At first, I ignored them all, too overwhelmed to step further into the spotlight. Madison didn't write. Linda stayed silent. Only my father reached out, a single, bitter voicemail, his words tight and clipped: "You made your point. Congratulations, Emily. I hope you're happy with the mess you've made." I listened, then deleted the message, letting the finality wash over me. I spent the next few days wandering Portland in a daze, letting the city anchor me. At my favorite coffee shop, the barista smiled, shy and tentative. "Saw your video," she whispered as she handed over my tea. "My sister and I fight all the time, but you made me call her last night." She blushed and rushed away before I could reply, but the warmth lingered. In Becca's living room, we watched the numbers climb. The hashtag you can't cut power started trending. People all over the country, sometimes the world, shared their own stories of feeling invisible, of losing and finding their voices. I felt part of something bigger, a chorus rising up from the quiet. It wasn't just my story anymore. And then, amid the hundreds of emails, one subject line caught my eye: invitation from Cynthia Ray. The name was familiar, CEO of a creative agency I'd admired from afar, someone whose own story had surfaced years ago. Curious, I opened the message. Dear Emily. Your honesty moved me. I know what it's like to feel erased. If you'd like to talk, I'll be at Barista Cafe downtown tomorrow at noon. No pressure. Just coffee, and maybe some hope. Warmly. Cynthia. I reread it twice, the words settling around me like a blanket. Becca read over my shoulder, her eyes wide. You have to go, she insisted. What's the worst that could happen? I agreed, nerves fluttering. That night, I barely slept. My mind spun with possibilities: what I would say, what I would wear, whether I even belonged in the same room as a woman like Cynthia Ray. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the cafe's tall windows as I stepped inside, smoothing the hem of my sweater. Cynthia was waiting at a corner table, her presence calm and confident. She stood as I approached, offering her hand. Emily, thank you for coming. We talked for nearly an hour, her questions gentle, her listening fierce. She told me about her own battles, how she'd built her company after years of being overlooked, how telling her truth had cost her some relationships but given her herself back. I saw you, she said quietly, and I saw myself, 20 years ago. The world needs more women who refuse to shrink. I felt tears prick at my eyes, not of sadness but recognition. We talked about work, creativity, advocacy, about how hard it is to change, and how necessary it is to try. Then, before I could second-guess myself, she leaned in and offered, I'm expanding my team. We need a voice like yours, someone who understands that stories matter. Would you consider joining us? For a moment, time froze. I thought of the little girl I used to be, staring out from the edge of family photos, wondering if she'd ever belong anywhere. I thought of my parents, my sister, the cost of telling the truth. And I thought, maybe this was the new start I'd always dreamed of. After Cynthia left, I sat in the cafe for a long while, watching people pass outside, students, couples, mothers, and daughters, each carrying their own hidden stories. My phone buzzed with new notifications, the hashtag still trending, the conversation rolling on. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what the world might see. Could I really step into this new life? Could I let myself be more than what my family decided? The question hung in the air, weighty and bright, just waiting for my answer. I used to hide my pain, now, people wanted to hear my voice. It was a shift so startling that some mornings I'd pause, coffee in hand, and just let the stillness of my own apartment wash over me. The clatter of cups, the hum of the city outside, even the gentle creak of the floorboards felt different now, like everything was a little bit brighter, a little bit more mine. Working at Cynthia Ray's creative agency was nothing like I'd expected. Her office was a sunlit space tucked between a bakery and a bike repair shop downtown, with tall windows and walls painted the pale green of new leaves. There were shelves lined with books, prints from local artists, and a wall of sticky notes in 100 colors, each one a testament to a project, a dream, or a client's gratitude. Cynthia welcomed me on my first day with a warm smile and a mug that read, "Your story matters." For the first time in a long while, I almost believed it. I was given a desk by the window, a place to work on our new campaign, Voices Uncut, a project for survivors of family abuse. The stories that came in were raw, sometimes heartbreaking, sometimes filled with quiet hope. I spent my days editing scripts, brainstorming ways to reach more people, and listening, always listening. Becca visited often, usually bearing pastries and encouragement. "You look lighter," she told me one afternoon as we sat in the agency's little kitchenette, sharing almond croissants and stories from our week. "I'm proud of you, Em." "I hope you're proud of yourself." "I think I am," I said, surprised at the truth of it. For once, I'm not just surviving, I'm actually living. Old classmates and even a few teachers reached out as my story made its way through the community. The local press called, wanting to feature me in a segment about resilience and forgiveness. At first, I hesitated. The thought of standing in front of a camera, sharing my private scars with the world, felt daunting. But Cynthia encouraged me. "You're not just telling your story for yourself, Emily. You're giving others permission to do the same." I moved into a small apartment downtown, a space with wide windows, exposed brick, and enough sunlight for a dozen plants. I hung my own pictures on the walls, photos of Becca and me, snapshots from agency projects, even a print of the vineyard where everything had changed. My old life felt farther away every day, softened at the edges like a dream I'd finally outgrown. When the agency announced an open house, I threw myself into the preparations. We wanted to invite the community in, to let people see the work we did and feel that they belonged. I ordered flowers, designed invitations, even baked a few batches of cookies for the reception table. On the day of the event, I wore a bright blue dress and the necklace Cynthia had given me, a delicate silver chain with a single uncut stone. The office buzzed with excitement. Staff greeted visitors at the door, and the halls filled with laughter and the soft hum of conversation. Community leaders, local press, friends, and strangers wandered the rooms, asking questions and sharing their stories. Midway through the afternoon, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Ms. Perry, my old English teacher, approached with a smile. "Emily Carter, look at you," she exclaimed, hugging me tight. "You've grown into your voice. I always knew you would." I blinked back tears, feeling the circle of my life slowly close and open again, this time on my own terms. As I handed out cookies and explained our mission, I saw Becca by the window, snapping photos of the event. She caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. For once, I felt seen, not for what I could give, or how well I blended in, but for simply being myself. Just as the afternoon was winding down, the room shifted. The buzz of conversation softened, and I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. Near the door, Linda and Robert stood together, their hands clasped tightly, eyes scanning the room as if searching for a familiar anchor. They looked different, older, smaller somehow. The air around them seemed tense, uncertain. They hadn't called or written since the wedding. I wasn't sure what I'd feel if I saw them again, anger, sadness, maybe relief. But as they moved slowly through the crowd, pausing to read the posters on the wall, I realized I mostly felt calm. I had made a home outside their expectations, and nothing they could say would change that. Cynthia noticed them too. She came over and rested a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to talk to them if you're not ready," she murmured. I nodded, heart pounding, but something in me said I was ready. Ready to face whatever this new life might bring, even the hard parts, the painful reunions, the conversations that had no easy answers. Linda and Robert hovered by the guest book, hesitant. Their faces looked drawn, as if they'd come not to reclaim something, but to see it from afar, to bear witness, even if they weren't part of the story anymore. I glanced around the room, at my colleagues, at the guests, at Becca, my chosen family. For the first time in a long time, I felt solid. Rooted. The world hadn't ended after my family fell apart. In some ways, it had finally begun. My parents walked in like strangers, lost among people who actually respected me. The open house was still alive with laughter and conversation, the office filled with sunlight and bouquets of wildflowers, voices echoing off polished floors. Old classmates, colleagues, and new friends moved easily around the space, their faces bright with recognition and pride. Linda and Robert lingered at the doorway, uncertain, as if searching for a version of their daughter that might still belong to them. I saw them before they saw me. They looked out of place, my mother's hair perfectly set, but her eyes darting from face to face, my father standing stiffly at her side, his mouth a hard line. They were dressed in their Sunday best, but in this lively, art-filled office, it was the easiest thing in the world to see just how small and cautious they had become. Becca caught my eye across the room. She moved to my side without a word, just a hand resting at my elbow, quiet and steady. Cynthia noticed too, joining us with her usual calm authority, as if drawing a gentle, invisible circle of support. Linda spotted me first. She straightened, tried to muster her old smile, the one she reserved for moments when she needed to impress someone. "Emily, this is quite a place you have here," she said, her voice a little too loud, a little too practiced. "Your work, it's impressive." I smiled politely, hearing all the things she wasn't saying. "Thank you, Mom. We're proud of what we're building here." Robert stepped forward, his hands fidgeting with the edge of a brochure. "We saw the campaign online. You've made quite a name for yourself, Emily. I just wish. Well, I wish things had been different." His words hung awkwardly between us. I waited, but he didn't finish. There was nothing left to explain. We all knew the story, it had been told, retold, and shared far beyond the walls of any family home. For a moment, we stood in silence, the noise of the open house humming in the background. Linda looked around, taking in the artwork, the laughter, the ease with which I spoke to the people around me. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, regret, maybe, or just confusion at this new world she no longer understood. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but let her hand drop. "We're proud of you," she said softly, as if rehearsing a line she hoped would bridge the distance. I nodded, letting her words settle without challenge or longing. "I'm glad you could come today." Robert cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been talking about everything. We know we made mistakes. We thought we were protecting Madison, protecting the family. Maybe we just didn't know how to love you the way you needed." There was an apology there, or as close to one as my father could manage. I found myself oddly calm, unruffled by the weight of old expectations. "I appreciate that you're here, Dad. But I think it's time you understood, I get to decide what matters now. I get to decide who I am." Becca squeezed my arm, Cynthia's presence a quiet reassurance at my side. I drew a breath, feeling the room steady around me. "You don't get to define me anymore," I told them, my voice gentle but certain. "That's my job now." My mother's lips parted, but whatever she meant to say was lost in the swirl of voices and the laughter of guests nearby. She looked down, smoothing the strap of her purse. Robert only nodded, his gaze finally meeting mine, uncertain but open in a way I hadn't seen before. Wanting to offer something that wasn't anger or accusation, I gestured to a small box on the welcome table, the feedback cards we'd given every guest. "We take feedback seriously here. If you have any thoughts, you're welcome to leave a note." Linda blinked in surprise, then nodded, understanding the gesture. There was something freeing about letting them step into my world, but on my terms. We stood for a moment longer, no longer adversaries, just people uncertain of the next step. I felt no urge to fill the silence. Some things, I realized, were best left unsaid. At last, my parents turned, making their way through the throng of guests. Their figures, once looming, seemed smaller now, fragile against the brightness of the afternoon. I watched them go, not with triumph, but with a strange, peaceful ache. Becca leaned in and whispered, "You did good, Em." Cynthia smiled, her eyes kind. "This is your space now. Your story." For the first time, I felt the door between my past and my future closing gently, not with a bang but with the soft hush of acceptance. I had not won or lost, I had simply found peace. As the open house continued and the sun slanted low through the tall windows, I stood among friends and colleagues, letting the old wounds settle into scars. Not erased, not forgotten, but healed enough to let something new grow in their place. Some scars you wear for life. Others you turn into armor. I used to wish the hardest things in my story would just disappear, like bruises fading under sunlight. Now I understand, some wounds become the strongest part of you, not because you forget, but because you grow. Autumn arrived softly in Portland, coloring the city in golden flame. My new apartment filled with morning light, plants thriving on the sills, photos of Becca and me tucked beside postcards from agency trips. The creative office downtown bustled each day, our voices uncut, campaign gaining momentum. We ran support groups, launched new podcasts, and watched as women from all over the country began to share their stories, some quietly, some loud and brave. I found hope in every message, every name scrawled in our inbox. Some afternoons, Becca and I would walk to the city park with coffee, passing under the maples, talking about work and the world. Sometimes, we said nothing at all, just shared a piece I'd never really known at home. She would glance at me, eyes bright, and I'd know that, whatever else changed, I'd always have my chosen family. One morning, scrolling through messages before work, I paused at a name I hadn't seen in months, Madison. Her note was brief, hesitant, but honest. "Hey, Em. I watched your speech online. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I hope you're okay. Maybe someday we can start over." My hand trembled a little, reading her words. I didn't reply, not yet. Healing, I'd learned, was not a race. Sometimes, you just had to let time do its work. Cynthia kept her promise, too. The agency grew, and so did my confidence. I began speaking at schools and community centers, sometimes with Becca by my side, sometimes alone. My voice, once so shaky and unsure, now rang clear and strong. Each story I heard reminded me, silence is a cage, but truth is a key. One chilly Saturday, we hosted a rally in the park. Local press showed up, families brought their daughters, and for the first time, I took the stage without clutching a script. I spoke about invisibility, about shame, about the moment I stopped waiting for permission to exist. I told them that families can wound us, but strangers, friends, neighbors, even a kind word from a barista, can help us heal. I watched young women in the crowd, their faces shining with possibility, and felt a deep, quiet pride. Afterward, Cynthia hugged me tightly, and Becca handed me a cup of cocoa, grinning. "You did it," she said. "You're the person you needed when you were young." We walked home together as the sun set, the city glowing in the early evening. Back at the agency, our windows caught the last light of day. Painted across the glass in bold, shining letters were the words, "Power cannot be cut." I stood for a moment, watching my reflection, my hair longer, healthy, strong, growing out into its own shape. Not what someone else wanted, but what I chose for myself. Life moved forward in small, beautiful ways. I learned to cook new recipes, filled the apartment with laughter and music, made space for quiet Sundays with books and tea. Sometimes, on rainy evenings, I'd still feel the ache of what was lost, the family I'd hoped for, the old dreams that no longer fit. but more often, I felt gratitude. For Becca, for Cynthia, for every stranger who wrote, "Thank you for helping me feel seen." One evening, Becca and I watched the city lights from the fire escape, wrapped in blankets against the chill. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" she asked. I thought about it for a long moment, then shook my head. No. Not anymore. Every scar, every wrong turn, it brought me here. I smiled, not for my parents, not for an audience, but for myself. In the months that followed, the campaign grew. We opened chapters in other cities. Our story, my story, became part of something bigger than pain. I watched girls and women walk into our offices, heads high, voices unafraid. And every morning, as sunlight crept across the letters on the agency's window, I remembered, power cannot be cut. Not by scissors, not by silence. Not ever again. I stepped into the day, no longer the background in someone else's story, but the author of my own. Looking back, I realized some scars shaped me into the person I am today. Sometimes, it takes losing what we thought we needed to find the strength we always had. Family isn't about perfection, it's about listening, forgiving, and choosing compassion, even when it's hard. If this story touched you or reminded you of your own journey, I invite you to share your thoughts or memories below. In the end, love finds its way back to us, often in the most unexpected ways.